What's going on, everyone? So, something that I've talked about heavily is the acquisitions and moves that the San Antonio Spurs made this offseason. Love the addition of Harrison Barnes, right? He's a guy that's not going to take away from your young talent, right? He's a guy that understands and plays his role excellent. He's going to be that 3 and D forward that could slot in either at the 3 or the 4 spot, right? He's a guy that, doesn't necessarily need the ball, but when he does have the ball, he can still make some plays, put the ball on the deck, go get a bucket. He has experience, championship DNA. He was a huge part in the Warriors winning some of those early championships, right? It's a guy that I just think can go a long way in just the growth and development of such a young team. Then Chris Paul. I mean, I've talked heavily about how I think Chris Paul was the best signing that the Spurs could have made outside of, of course, like a Giannis or a Jokic or something like that. But as far as what this team needs, a veteran leader that can come in, help these guys win, put guys in proper position, help develop your young guards, right? Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell. I just think Chris Paul goes such a long way in that regard. I think the impact that Chris Paul will have on this Spurs team will be beyond even this season. I mean, look at guys like SGA. And SGA has talked about how much of an impact Chris Paul has had on just his career and his trajectory and him reaching that star level talent, right? Imagine what he could do with a Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, right? Even like a Trey Jones, right? Like they have several guys on this roster that I think could really just kind of benefit on and off the court from Chris Paul, right? And I also think that with these two will translate to just much more wins. I mean, you look at Chris Paul's history with, taking teams that are at a certain win rate and then him being placed on it, and all of a sudden that doubles at times. This is a guy that is going to, just by being on the court, going to make the Spurs a far better team. And then you add in Harrison Barnes, you add in another year of Victor Wembanyama and his development and what he was able to do and the experience he gained and gathered with Team USA and all that stuff. And you look at Victor in year 2, and one of the things that I've talked about heavily is pushing your chips in sooner rather than later. Obviously, there's nothing right now that makes sense in that regard, but if something does develop, right, let's say, the Suns start to implode, right, and Devin Booker becomes available. Right, if I'm the Spurs, I'm doing whatever I have to go get Devin Booker. And then if you can get another piece, go get that other piece and try to squeeze out an early championship or two. Why Victor Wembanyama is very young, right? But what you don't want, and in many ways the worst thing that could potentially happen, is you kind of are in the middle of the pack, right? You're not good enough to contend and win a championship, which I don't believe the Spurs are. For being honest, I don't think that they're, a top 5 team in the NBA, right? Could they, if Victor really takes some significant strides, right? Could they, do I think that they could be a playoff team? Yes. Do I think that maybe, right, you have this new look Spurs team? Do I think that the right matchups, right? Couple things kind of fall their way, couple dominoes, right? All of a sudden they're in the conference finals or something? Sure. But it's not something that I would bet on. It's not something that I think is super realistic, which is fine. Again, they're a very young team that's going to have to go through their hiccups, that are going to have to go through their turmoils, right? And I do like the veteran leadership of Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, but also you don't want to, again, be in that middle of the pack. You don't want to not be good enough to contend, but you don't want to be, good enough to where you're out of the lottery and all your picks are like the 18th pick or the 19th pick or something like that, to where you're not really getting the best value. And it begs the question of, are the Spurs doing the right thing bringing in a Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes when you could be going the other direction and just let your young guys get the development, be bad for another year or two, particularly in this upcoming draft that have guys like Cooper Flag. And I mean, the top 5 picks or projected picks in this year's draft all would have been taken number 1 in this previous draft, right? And then you have another maybe like half dozen that could potentially be stars, right? Like this draft is looked at as one of the better drafts in the last few years. And it's like, obviously, with the lottery odds and stuff like that, there's no guarantee that you get a Cooper Flag. But even if you don't, even if you get another nice foundation piece, right? Now, here's the thing, right? At some point, you have to play these guys. Like, how much young talent can you have on the roster? Now, some people, just based on comments that I've gotten and stuff like that, some people look at it and go like, no, you need to have as much as you can. If you can get all these young picks, you don't trade the Atlanta pick, you don't do this, you don't do that. And I get that, right? Like, to an extent, I do understand that. But at some point, you're going to have to start paying guys. You're going to have to start making some tough decisions. And that's why I lean more towards kind of pushing your chips in, kind of consolidating things to go get that bigger impact piece that you already know is proven and can help right out the gate. I think you either A, need to go that route, or B, you tank for another year or two, get another young piece or two that maybe you can later flip, or, if he becomes a star, then great, and rather than kind of being in the middle. Last thing the Spurs want is to be in the middle for the next 3-4 years. Again, right now, I don't think it's a big deal. I personally like the acquisitions. I personally think that they made the right choice in that regard. But if you don't, like, if they're the 10th seed and they're a play-in team, right? Or let's say that they do finish as the 8th, but they lose in the play-in or something, right? Like, now you're not in the playoffs, so you're not gaining that experience. And then on top of that, right, like you're like the 19th pick, or, at best like the 15th pick. And it's like, again, you're kind of in the middle. You don't want to be in the middle, right? But I do think that there is this balancing act of where you want to grow and develop guys. Victor is so good, so fast, that I also think that there's an argument that they might be middle of the pack regardless, just because he's so good, right? That the Spurs may end up just by default of having Victor and just the experience he gained with, Team France and the Olympics and all that stuff, and playing against Team USA and the Avengers and his level of production. I do think that there is a real genuine argument that Victor is just, you're going to be middle of the pack regardless, right? Like, you could put me, you watching this video, and a couple dudes off the street, and Victor's still going to get you, at least to the play-in, which, again, we've seen guys that talented. We've seen guys that are that versatile, that have that capability. And Victor does seem like one of those guys. I don't want to see the Spurs kind of get into that mix where, you look at teams like, like the Clippers, or, the Sixers are teams that come to mind where they're good, but they're not good enough. And every year it's like they're, first or second round exit. And so they don't get like really quality draft picks or anything like that. And it's kind of like, and you don't want to be in that purgatory, right? You don't want to be in that position. Or like the Pelicans are probably another good one that comes to mind, right? Like some of these teams that just, every year they're not good enough to get in, but they're not bad enough to be tanking, right? They're kind of just in the middle of the pack, right? And that's what you don't want to see the Spurs do, because the Spurs have, they got a real generational talent in Victor Wembanyama. I mean, this dude is unbelievable, and I'm really excited for his future. And hopefully, the Spurs can kind of figure this out. Again, nothing wrong with having that like in between year, right? It's just you almost should have done it last year, right? It's like, you probably should have done something sooner, but it's just how things fall with the draft and all that stuff, of course. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you think like, last thing you want to be is in purgatory? Do you think that, the Spurs should still be trying to tank right now rather than trying to win games, right? Because the team is so young, keep stacking up young talent. What do you think? No, like you got enough. You got Castle, you got Vassell, you got, Victor, like start hitting your stride and trying to win some games here and establish that winning culture, which I do agree that's a important thing regardless. Whether you're young, old, at some point you want to start establishing that winning environment. But however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Helps me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.